I'm Minessa Konecky, and this is Research Administration in a Nutshell, a series where I make short videos about different activities that we engage in as research administrators and what it's like to be an RA. Drop a like on the video or subscribe to the channel on YouTube for more research administration stuff. And massive thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end, but for now, let's get going. So, at some point during your career, you're going to have investigators who leave your organization. Depending on the nature of the relationship with the research administrator to other ancillary departments within the organization and how the onboarding and offboarding is managed, the RA's role in this could be light to very heavy. So for example, if you were someone who works in pre-award in the central office, you may not be as involved in a PI leaving as you may be if you are the departmental research administrator. So the scope of what you'll be responsible for will depend on the nature of your relationship. So in the snap sheet, you'll notice that there are some questions here that basically talks about what the RA's role is, and then there's some questions on the left-hand side that you'll notice, and these are questions that you're going to want to ask your investigator. The ones on the bottom are ones you're going to want to ask your manager, and these are going to be associated to what is your role within the organization, and then once you find out that part, the next step is identifying the pieces of information you need to be able to triage to the various other departments that are going to be involved, because during a closeout, you're going to find that there are a lot of people that get involved, and typically the RA, even someone who's heavily involved, is involved mostly as a shepherd of the process and is typically only heavily actively involved in things related to financial and agreement responsibilities. So we take care of a lot of those things, but a lot of times we're the ones who know that the investigator is leaving, so we let the compliance department know, we let the technical ventures office know, we let the development office know, right? We let those people know, and then they will typically reach out to the PI, connect, and then take care of their spot. But typically we or someone in the department will let them know. Now, make sure that you, before doing anything, you check to see if there's a research administrator who already has some of these processes in place. Typically, if you've been around long enough, you've been doing closeouts long enough, you might have a folder where you keep your emails and your communications and the list of things that you need and so on. And that's what I've kind of put together here for you, which is this is what I have. It's very generic, but you may be able to get something similar from someone in your organization who's already done all of this work, right? Where we typically get involved, so now we've found out the PI is leaving, we know their end date. Where we typically get involved is where the grant transfers come in. Now, the first thing you want to do is find out what is the PI's end date, and then you're basically identifying what is the final disposition going to be for every project. So you're going to do an analysis. So let's say the PI is leaving in 3 months. You're going to do an analysis financially to get to the end of the 3 months. So this is what our finances are going to look like. You're going to talk to the PI to find out which of these projects is being moved to a new institution and which of these projects is staying here. Depending on the nature of the grant, they may stay, it may go. Most of the time they go. Typically things that do not go are things that are related to a clinical trial within that institution, or things that are discretionary or sundry in nature that were given, or startup funds that were given to the investigator to come on. So those are things that typically do not end up leaving. Once you know, so you're going to meet with the PI, you're going to talk to your manager and find out what can and can't be moved, what the policies are. Always check your institutional and organizational policies about closeouts. They may already have a lot of these things written down. Then you're going to talk to your manager, get the list of what can and can't be closed out. Then you talk to your PI and say, okay, which of these, you're telling them, okay, these are the things that can't be moved. Of the ones that we can move, what's happening with them? And then working together, you'll develop what's going to be your final financial statement, which is basically the report of all of the funds till the end date, which is now when the PI is leaving. You're going to want to be connected with the RA at the destination institution, where they will now need to be connected with all of the sponsors. You'll have to check each individual sponsor for what their transfer policies and processes are, and then follow those. For some organizations, they'll have a very established process. They'll have forms, like the NIH has a very established relinquishing process that you can follow, and the link is in the snapshot. Whereas some other organizations, it's literally just an email, you connecting one person. And in that case, it may be, okay, these are the final expenses. We're going to send a check back to the sponsor, or we're going to send a check to the new organization. In other cases, the funds will be de-obligated. So in the case of the NIH, they de-obligate funds to us, and then they re-obligate them to the destination organization. Typically, there's a lot of involvement there. As a part of that process, protocols maybe need to be closed out. POs need to be closed out. You need to check on any internal expenses that are automatically posting to close those out. You want to make sure that the payroll adjustments are made, that the people are either terminated or transferred into a new department. You want to make sure all of the effort is certified, handle return of badges, any P cards, anything like that. These are the times where you want to take care of all of that and close everything down. Something to keep in mind is that make sure that you get every signature that you possibly can from your investigator before they leave, because it's very difficult to get signatures sometimes after an investigator leaves. Sometimes they're great. They'll just sign it off and you're good to go. Sometimes they will not sign things, and then you can end up in a situation like the University of San Diego, and none of us wants to end up in that position. So this is another really great example of how research administration helps to protect institutions from loss of funds and being fined for not being compliant. And in this case, they lost access to all of their grants because final reports were not signed by the PI. So it is really important to keep in mind that what we do is not just tactically closing this out, we are protecting the institution. If there's any data use agreements or material transfer agreements that need to be done, that you'll need to go figure that out within your own organization, what the policy and process is on that. Typically the RA does not handle those. You will talk to whoever it is, and then they will take care of getting the DUAs and the MTAs taken care of. So the rest of the things that are on this list, there's the management of intellectual assets and research data, there's handling of radiation equipment, there's lab stuff, there's a lot of things you may get involved with that may or may not apply at your organization. You may have an organization that doesn't have lab space. You may have an organization or a PI who doesn't really have a whole lot going on and they have 2 grants and that's it. So not everything applies to everyone. For anything related to the science itself, this list that I've provided here, these are all things that they're going to need to do. So this is mostly for the PI to just know. This is not your responsibility. However, it is really helpful for us to know and sort of let the PI know as they are transitioning that these are some of the things they're going to need to deal with. They appreciate it a lot when there's someone else looking out for them as they are closing out, because there's a lot of things going on as they're transferring. I've noted these with a bell. So anything that has a bell next to it, typically you're just informing someone, you're not getting very involved. And other than the ones that we just talked about, you're not going to be getting deeply involved in many of these. The one that you're going to probably spend a little bit of time on is going to be the laboratory equipment, getting a list of all the lab equipment and the sources of the payment for that, so that they can be identified what gets transferred off, what gets what gets transferred to the new organization, and then what stays here. You will want to look at your organizational policies around equipment transfer, because it is highly likely that if equipment is something that's being transferred, that your organization already has a process in place for this. Now you've done all this stuff, now the PI is gone. Thank you for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon who help keep my channel alive. You can support for less than $5 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, LinkedIn, and my website. And as always, have a great day.